Hey everyone, welcome to another recording session of the Polite Society podcast powered by the Second Amendment Foundation. We're going to be recording this one on the 6th of February 2023, Monday evening. Your team tonight is going to be Rob Morse of Self-Defense Gun Stories and Kerrie Ann Auclair. Kerrie Ann, I've got it. Before we go live, let me change over here, and I'm gonna change your titling here before we actually start recording the show. What is the name of your web show you do?
Video
with Renee?
Yeah.
It's Sisters in Arms, a firearm story.
Okay, let me show you. Make sure that you're okay with this. A firearms journey?
A firearm story.
A firearm story.
Yep.
This is how we make the sausage.
Yeah, this is how you see how badly I type. All right. We're going to be recording episode 650 in just a few seconds. I'm getting social media hooked up. As we do that, I want to remind everybody, if you are watching on the Polite Society Podcast Facebook or YouTube feed, you can comment directly on those, and we'll get your comments. If you're watching anywhere else, if you're watching on Rumble, if you're watching on OpsLens, if you're watching anywhere else, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag PSPodcast. And we'll get those tweets in my software just as quickly, and we will get them on the air as well. I was asked a question earlier when I was on the bullet if Rumble will appear when they comment on Rumble. No, it will not. I don't get those comments in my software, and I cannot have... We're broadcasting everywhere. We're on Getter, we're on all kinds of places. I cannot have all those tabs open and keep popping in between those to get the comments, and I couldn't put them on air even if I could get them. So, I didn't quite hit that one right. And okay.
By the time we get another engineer to monitor all the comments, we can do more. But right now, nope. We've got it.
Yeah,
we found out how many balls we can juggle at one time, and it may actually be one less than we have in the air right now.
No, that's actually one less than we have in the air right now. We've got all kinds of comments coming in already, so I think we're ready to bring up show notes, and I think we're ready to kick this thing off. You two ready to fly?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Then we're going Masad Ayub in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masad Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, and welcome to the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society Podcast. We're recording this on Monday, the 6th of February, 2023. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse, and on tonight's show, we talk about a judge's ruling that marijuana users should be able to own guns.
We also talk about SAF and Connecticut Civil Defense League filing a new lawsuit for residents in the Constitution State.
And I'm Kerrie Ann Auclair, and one of our DGUs is about an 80-year-old Chicago resident saves the day by practicing pogo. So climb aboard.
Strap in.
And hang on. Episode 650 of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast starts right now. All right, it's Monday night at 6 p.m. in the Central Time Zone. That means it's time for another live edition of the Polite Society podcast. As I usually do, Rob, I'm going to say it's been a little while since you've been on Polite Society. It's been, 6-7 days now? Because you were on with me last week. So, but you did do some traveling. What's been up with you, man?
Yeah, I racked up the miles, not like you would on driving a big rig, but for me it was a long way. I went from Louisiana to Central Florida to join the Florida Freedom Festival put on by Florida Kerrie. I've done that 4 or 5 years now. I get to see old friends and make new ones. I am such a fan of it. I'm trying to think how I can bring it to Louisiana. Your state should have a get-together too, really. Kerrie Ann, how have you been?
I'm doing great. I had a class over the weekend and getting a lot of stuff ready for our next show, and another class coming up for Armed Women of America in a couple weeks. So I'm doing good.
All right,
Paul?
That leaves me, and I am getting ready to be where the picture behind me looks like I am right now. Been doing a lot of preparing. We, in 13 days, we will be landing in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Susan and I have been just going nuts preparing for this. We are super pumped up, and I'm going to try very hard to keep up with bullets with my daily broadcast while I'm down in the Virgin Islands. I'm going to try to get the phone out and do a just me version of the bullet every day. Polite Society probably will not happen. Weekend bullet definitely will not happen, because both days I'm going to be doing the daily bullet, or the weekend edition of the bullet. I'm going to be at about 35,000 feet, and that really does not lend itself well to live internet broadcasting. So
you need some time to yourself too.
You figured out a way you could go to the Caribbean and stay in the United States.
Well, the U.S. Virgin Islands is a part of the United States. Yeah. Yes. The Constitution does allegedly apply there. So, although and we'll get into this more when I am down there and when I come back, there are some really shaky constitutional law things that have happened where basically the Supreme Court ruling is, look, these people are too stupid to know what is going on with the Constitution, therefore parts of it don't apply here. And I'll get in more. I'm going to be delving deeper into that when I'm down there, and we'll get into that more when I am on the way down there and on the way back. So that's kind of what's going on with me. I'm doing my regular broadcasts right up until the day before I leave, but as I go down there, I'm going to try to keep up with what I can, but we'll see how well it goes. I want to, as we get started here, I want to, if you would please, I want to remind you about, let me see if it reloads. There we go. Self-Defense Radio Network. Tagline says all your pro-freedom podcasts in one place. You can see we're there. You can see Rob's Self-Defense Gun Stories is there. Amanda's Eye on the Target Radio. Charlie's Riding Shotgun with Charlie. And there are more on the way. Right now you can see there are 15 shows with more on the way. You can listen to them all right off the website, or if you prefer, there's subscription information for each show right there. Please go visit us at sdrn.us. I'm going to say, Rob and Kerrie, we've got some news to get to, so I think we're going to step aside to break. When we come back, the other side of this, we're going to be talking about that the first story is that judge that has said, yeah, it shouldn't matter if you use marijuana. You should still be able to own a gun. We will get to that right after we hear from ACLDN, right back after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Gibbons, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by Network President Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
Oop.
I'm ready to go if you are. Whoops.
How about I do that button? And that says,
Yeah.
Hi, welcome back. This is the news segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundations. I'm getting comments, and I know normally I have the software set up, so while the commercials are running, there's a solo picture of me up. I did some changes. I changed my background, and that left all those black. You're going to have to live with that for this week, a black screen while the ads are playing. By next week, I'll have it fixed. So by tonight at about 10 o'clock Central Time, we'll have it fixed. But let's get started here. And Rob, I believe you signed up for that first news story.
Yeah, I wondered if we were going to go to comments. Okay, here we go. U.S. District Judge Patrick Wyrick dismissed an indictment against the plaintiff Jared Harrison. The judge said that the statute used to ban gun ownership by marijuana users is, here's where I'm going to quote directly, unconstitutionally vague in violation of the Due Process Clause, and it unconstitutionally infringes upon his fundamental right to possess a firearm in violation of the Second Amendment, close quote. Harrison, the plaintiff, was indicted by a federal grand jury in August of 2022 for possessing a firearm while being, quote, an unlawful user of marijuana. In applying the recent Bruin Supreme Court ruling, the judge pointed out, again, I got a quote, the question here is thus whether stripping someone of their right to possess a firearm solely because they use marijuana is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearms regulation. If it is not, then the section of the law cannot be constitutionally applied to Harrison, no matter the reasonableness of the policy it embodies. Close quote. What do you guys think of this?
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to chime in here real quick, and that is this. As speaking as a libertarian, I do not care what you put in your body, whether it be alcohol, whether it be marijuana, whatever. I recommend you do not do excessive amounts of anything and carry a weapon. I do not recommend you do excessive amounts of anything and drive a car. If you can feel the difference up here, it's time to put away the keys. It's time to hand off your defensive capabilities to other people as well.
And
Paul, I wonder if go ahead.
Sorry. I was just saying that some people use marijuana for medical reasons. So I just think it's wrong to be taken that away, taken that rights away, Second Amendment rights away from somebody if they're using it for medical reasons.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't myself distinguish between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, just like I don't differentiate between having a drink or two because you like to have a drink or two, or having a drink or two because you're trying to recover from that punch you took in the face earlier in the evening. I mean, either way, if you can feel up here that you're not absolutely positively normal, I don't think you should be driving a car, and I don't think you should be carrying a firearm in your self-defense.
Agreed.
But I don't think there should be a law against it.
Guys, I wonder if this is one judge's way to throw the Brulin ruling back into the face of the U.S. Supreme Court. We're going to talk about that in another story tonight.
No, good point.
Paul, you're up for the next story, Connecticut?
Yeah, absolutely. On Friday, February the 3rd, the Connecticut Citizens Defense League, CDL, in conjunction with the Second Amendment Foundation, filed an emergency motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction in federal court in response to a recent ruling by the BATFE. That was published on January 31st. ATF's rule suddenly reclassifies certain other firearms that are neither rifles, shotguns, or pistols, as being rifles. This technical change pushes others within the definition of the assault weapon under Connecticut's ban. The ATF's rule impacts tens of thousands of Connecticut citizens who are otherwise law-abiding, but now have found themselves facing possible felony prosecution through no fault of their own. This is where it gets interesting. While residents of other states are able to register these firearms with the ATF or change the short barrels for longer ones to make them legal, the ATF has stated it will not permit any such registration from Connecticut residents due to Connecticut's assault weapons ban. Mm-hmm. And nor will changing out the barrels avoid any redesignation as banned assault weapons are under Connecticut law. As such, many thousands of Connecticut residents who were previously authorized by the Connecticut State Police's Special Licensing and Firearms Unit to purchase these firearms find themselves without legal options had by residents of most other states. Rob, man, you're up first in comments, and I like where you're going with what I see.
There is a concept in law saying, is this a law where you were guilty of a technical violation, you broke a rule, or is there a victim somewhere? And in this case, we've made a law that turned tens of thousands of nonviolent gun owners into criminals. Their crime is owning a gun. Kerrie Ann?
No fault of their own either.
Yeah.
It was legal last week. It's not legal now.
Exactly.
Yep. Let me get, and we've got some comments. For some reason, our comments are just a little bit delayed. I want to get to some comments about our previous story, and that was one about marijuana. I need to come over here and hit this button. No, that's not it. Aha. I see what's going on. Give me just a second. That was the last comment from the last show.
Some engineers.
I'm telling you, man, we need to fire the guy that does our video production, man. Because he's obviously screwing up. I did some changes, and it just messed everything up. Gun websites on the YouTube side. This decision is an opportunity for both sides of the debates, guns and marijuana, to listen to and understand the other side. Guns aren't that dangerous. Neither is marijuana. A second bonus victory here, in my opinion. I'm going to agree with Pete there.
Pete, let me tease you with something. Contemporary marijuana is nothing like what existed 200 years ago. The THC levels are way higher now. So, at what point do we say look, if it's this strong, it's okay. If it's that strong, it's not. Interesting questions, and I don't have answers for that yet.
I got to unmute myself. I was typing there, and I didn't want to get the click, click, click on the air. Dana, who happens to be that when we get to defensive gun uses, Dana's the one that writes them, and he's also chiming in here. He says, eventually marijuana will be taken off the federal list. Legislation has been filed to do that.
Yeah.
And I would say, does that have a chance of passing the Senate? Yes. Would Biden sign it? Maybe.
Oh.
Does it have a chance to pass the House? I think so, but it's not as strong as a chance it has of passing the Senate.
Well, I kind of agree with you, Paul, earlier when you said, you have to be a responsible gun owner. And if things are feeling a little different up here, then, it's time to make a change.
Put it down, put it away.
Put it down. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You go to the liquor store, you buy alcohol. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's just irresponsible.
Get a couple more comments in here. Dana says, Rob, the THC levels are many times higher than even just the 1970s.
Okay.
And
but you understand, Dana, the reason I was going back to the 1790s is that's when that law was put in place, and that's where the courts would go. So, yeah, your point's good. I get it.
Another good point from Pete. Similar question. Magazine capacities are much higher now than back in 1776. Adults can handle risk and are free to explore it.
Yes, and yes. There are some that are. Without going into remember, I just spent a weekend with Bob Campbell, who is the wellspring of obscure firearms knowledge. So I've been tuned up.
We're gonna. When I was in high school and college, you got tuned up. I think it means something different than what you are talking about, Rob. But anyway,
I was recently, yeah, okay. No, you're right. No fists were thrown. I was recently made smarter.
Okay. Wow. One more, and then we're going to go ahead and move on. But I want to get this one in. Again, gun websites. Fentanyl kills 79,000, is on the streets today. Being concerned about a plant being taxed and regulated is not on focus. Let's go ahead and move on, because we're gonna get stuck on drugs here if we don't.
We can spend an entire podcast right there. Yeah. I get it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Kerrie Ann, I think you are signed up to read the next story.
All right. So, the Fifth Circuit bombshell: a federal law that prohibits people subject to domestic violence. Domestic violence restraining orders from possessing of firearms is unconstitutional. A conservative-leaning appeals court ruled Thursday. The ruling is the latest significant decision disarming gun restrictions in the wake of the Supreme Court expansion of Second Amendment rights last year in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the Bruin decision. The Fifth U.S. Circuit of Appeals said that the federal law targeting those believed to possess a domestic violence threat could not stand under the Bruin test, which requires the gun laws have a historical analogy to the firearms regulation in the place at the time of the Constitution framing. Though the lens were concluded that the law's ban possessing of firearms is an outlier, that would never have accepted the Fifth Circuit said. So,
I think the issue here isn't really one of domestic violence at all. It's an issue of, are these accusations versus the penalties that are incurred after a conviction through a due process proceedings. So if someone takes out a restraining order against you, you can do that on Tuesday. You can get a TRO against a ham sandwich.
Right, agreed. Yep.
The issue is, were you represented in that proceeding? Were you able to bring witnesses and evidence in your defense? If the answer is no, then it's a hard sell that we get to remove your fundamental rights.
Right.
And as much as I write about domestic violence, and I hate the thought that an abuser is going to have a firearm, abusers have firearms, and the magic is for the defender to get one too. And too often, TROs are thrown at each other. That leaves the typically the male, the stronger of the two, at an advantage. Is that where we want to go?
No. Nope.
Dan, and I'm expecting to get a whole lot of comments on this one too, so let them fly, folks. I've got the time budgeted. Dana says many protection orders are filed as a matter of process in divorce proceedings. No evidence of intent by the spouse.
Right. It's like anybody can do a... Yep.
Have you seen that amongst your students?
I haven't, thankfully, but, anybody can, throw a red flag order on you. Anybody can call up and say, hey, I feel as though that this person's going to be this or that or whatever. And next thing you know, you get your firearms taken away and there's no proof of anything. So, I mean, this doesn't make sense because, like you said earlier, how can they prove anything?
There are no standards of evidence, right?
No.
There is no cross-examination of evidence, right? What else we got, Paul?
We got a comment coming from a Facebook user. Due process? I think not. Yeah, and this is that's the case with both restraining orders and, as Kerrie was saying, red flag laws. Quite often, this happens before the person, either the red flag designee or the person getting the restraining order against him, doesn't even know court's in session. And all of a sudden, bang, a legal order has been issued. And if you're not able to defend yourself in court, in my opinion, there's no way you should ever lose your fundamental rights.
Right.
Let me throw this to you and to our audience. If temporary restraining orders are implicated here, aren't red flag laws equally implicated?
One would have to think so, and that's that. Yeah. I've got Alex Uli coming up on the bullet on Friday, on the Legal Friday edition. I will just guarantee you, because I've already got show notes started for that one, that's going to come up. Right. Is this ruling about restraining orders, will this apply to red flag laws as well? And let's be clear, this law only applies in the Fifth Circuit. That Fifth Circuit is Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Another thing to think about with this particular one, this could change the 4473 in those states unless it goes nationwide.
Oh, yeah, great.
So do I have to answer and the feds can't do anything, or can I legally leave it blank because it's a question about a non-pertinent fact? Ooh. Won't the lawyers have fun now?
Tune in Friday. All right, Rob. Let's go ahead. I'm waiting on more comments to come in, and please do keep your comments coming. Anything on the news segment you want to talk about, we're going to have time at the end of the segment because you've only got one more story. Rob, you want to take this Wyoming story, man?
Yeah, I do. Non-violent felons may finally be able to regain their civil rights, including these rights like having a firearm, serving on a jury, and to hold public office in Wyoming. The Wyoming Senate Judiciary Committee voted unanimously to forward a bill on Friday that would allow Wyoming to join about 24 other states in restoring the rights of prior offenders without a pardon or an expunging the criminal record. There are many other states that offer some combination of rights restorations, but only some rights, or with special stipulations. Quote, talk about a cruel and unusual punishment, that is to say, losing your rights forever, said Senator Eric Garlow, a Republican from Gillette. He was the bill's sponsor. Some examples of nonviolent felonies include counterfeiting, tax crimes, and drug offenses. In those cases, many, including some representatives, feel it's important to welcome one-time offenders back as full members of society after they've paid their dues. A person is automatically ineligible for this if they are a repeat offender.
I think I'm going to jump in here quick, and this is a burr in my saddle from a long, long time back, and I want to explain. Again, I'm not an attorney, not even in South Dakota. In South Dakota, if you write a check that bounces and the value of that check is $250 or more, you're a felon. Show me one place where you can pay rent that rent is not at least $250 a month. Also, think about single moms and trying to balance checkbooks and paying all bills. And I was young and stupid once too. I had to learn how to balance a checkbook when I was a very young adult. They didn't even teach it in school back in the 80s. And so I had to figure it out once I got a checking account. And I never bounced a $250 check, but if I had, there's a good chance I could have lost my gun rights for life. There's a lot of things that are felonies that I do not believe should be, and good on Wyoming for saying, look, anybody can screw up once. Nonviolent felons should get all of their rights back.
Paul, recently with COVID, we had a lot of people forced out of a job. Unfortunately, we also had an explosion of addiction. So you're filling out the checkbook, there's nothing entered, and you find out that your wife drained the account with an unexpected bill. Maybe she has an addiction problem. Maybe you're not even living together, but she still has access to the account. And now, for a $250 error, you're a felon. That's crazy. That's not justice. So we want to separate mistakes like that from intentional violent criminals. Kerrie Ann, what do you think?
Right. No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think COVID definitely put us all in a certain situation that, we didn't expect to find ourselves, and some people anyways, and I think that we all made mistakes before in the past, and we shouldn't be judged over a check that we bounced or something. It just doesn't make any sense.
All right, let me, I got to do just one little thing here, and then I'm going to get back to comments, but I want to look at something. I want to see if what I think is happening is really happening. And wow, I can't see all the comments. So
you want me to read the DGUs while you?
No, let's. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put up the comment and
Yeah.
yeah. I spoke about red flag laws at GRPC. They violate several Bill of Rights amendments, Dr. John. And I should explain, if you're watching the Polite Society podcast listeners group, I don't see who you are. I believe that's Dr. John Adine, although it could, I suppose, be Dr. John Lott, because both of them spoke at GRPC, and both of them covered the red flag law debacles. So, and I wasn't able to see all the comments as I did a quick look at Polite Society listeners, so I'm not really sure which Dr. John it was.
I'm betting it's a Texas accent rather than Montana.
I would think you are probably right. Probably. And then let's see, and it is. He just commented that it is Dr. Adine. He also said, thanks to Chuck Schumer, there is no funding for restoration of gun rights at the federal level. We talked about that on the bullet, and I think that happened in the 90s is when that program got defunded, and that is right. It was Schumer that spearheaded that. That was back in the days when we had Lautenberg still in the Senate as well. Lautenberg has moved on to wherever he's at now, which is not with us, so he's certainly not in the Senate. But anyway, yeah, we need to get that refunded as well. Refunded being funded again. We need to get that program funded again on the federal level, simply because if you screw up a little bit and you get a felony at a young age, if there are 18-year-olds who get caught in a felony, they've lost their gun rights for life. If they turn things around, they're a great citizen for 30, 40 years. They're in their 50s, maybe even 60s. They still cannot possess a firearm to protect themselves and our country, and that's just wrong. I think we're caught up on comments here, and thank you, Dr. Adine. Let's go ahead and that's the end of our stories for the news segment. Let's go ahead and step aside to break. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's okay. We're going to go to this break. When we come back, we're going to talk about defensive gun uses, and we'll be right back right after this for the Complete Combatant.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
All right, we are back. This is the Defensive Gun Use segment of the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. I read this at the beginning of every one, so I should have it memorized by now after 650 freaking episodes, but I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The Defensive Gun Use segment is intended as information, not as training. As always, the opinions of our hosts are only their own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. Kerrie, looks like you volunteered to read the first one, a Don't Mess with the Old Guy one.
I know. So Chicago, Illinois. When are they going to leave the old man alone? So an 80-year-old homeowner was in his home at 10:30 a.m. when two individuals knocked at his door. Once he opened the door, a man and a woman, forced their way into the home. The homeowner, a pogo practitioner, fought back. He managed to fire a shot off, striking the male intruder in the chest. The female intruder decided additional body piercings were not needed and escaped without damaging her body. The homeowner suffered several injuries, including a severe head injury, and he was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The pair of intruders fled the scene, but later sought medical treatment at the same hospital, ironically. So, and let's see, the perp was, who suffered from a hole in the chest, was also admitted in critical condition. Since then, the pair have been taken into custody by police and charged, and charges are pending. So, don't mess with an old man. Don't do it.
Paul, you had a comment?
Yeah, I muted myself because I was typing again. Two things I want to say on this one. First one, good on the guy for pogo. Pants on, gun on. Good on him. I don't think he'd have been able to get to the bedroom, get the easy access safe opened, get to his firearm, and then take care of things. Because as the story said, he had severe head injuries and was being treated in critical condition at the local hospital. So good on him for having pants on, gun on. Secondly, I want to bring up, and I bring this up from time to time, you are never out of the fight until you are no longer breathing or you are totally unconscious. This guy has a severe head injury. He's still able to draw his firearm and injure one of his attackers, almost lethally. It was a chest shot. So, those two good things. Rob, I know you got another point you want to bring up that I see from what your stereotype is right on.
Yeah, we don't know what they said to convince the older man to open the door. Because you could come up with all kinds of stories. It was an apartment building. He was on the ground floor walk up because he's 80 years old. He doesn't like the stairs. One thing that concerns me, my dad died in his 70s, and he'd been on blood medications for a number of years, including blood thinners that reduce the chance of stroke. For a lot of old people, you take a hard hit to the head, you're going to be concussed. You're going to have a lot of bleeding on the brain. So what might not kill a 20-year-old could prove fatal to an 80-year-old. Kerrie Ann, did you have something?
I was just going to say that I have a lot of ladies that are actually in their 70s and 80s, and they come and train all the time for this very reason. So it was really awesome that, it sounds to me anyways, that this gentleman was trained. He practiced. So, no matter what your age is, it's so important to continue education, and, it's your civil right.
I'm going to jump in one more time here. And am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay. I'm going to jump in one more time here. And I want to go back to what Rob was saying. I'm not 70 or 80 years old. However, as many of you are aware, I did have some medical issues last year. And I'm going to just draw a line right there. I often keep my chin down on the show, but you can see a scar right here. I had a medical procedure where they cleaned out my left carotid artery. And I've been on blood thinners for almost 2 years now. My cardiologist will be taking them off if I go through one more set of blood work that's supposed to be done in April and everything comes back good. But I'm going to attest to what Rob said. Right now, a hard hit to the head would be a bad thing to happen to me. And if I have just a little scrape on my hand, I can bleed for hours with just a little scrape. So, yeah, blood thinners, man, they are nothing to mess with. So, certainly try, if you're on blood thinners, again, try to stay out of any conflicts where you could actually get physical. Not that you would want to get in one anyway. All right, Rob, look, you are Johnny on the spot. I have you on this next one for the next DGU. What you got, man?
There was a story in the news of a 13-year-old Palestinian boy who was arrested by Israeli police in connection to a shooting in Jerusalem. The incident was captured in video, and it was posted by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. It showed the boy opening fire on a small group of men walking on the city street near the City of David archaeological site. A father, aged 45, and his son, aged 22, were injured and taken to the hospital in serious but stable condition. The attack stopped when two nearby civilians carrying licensed weapons shot the boy. Israel has put in gun licensing reforms to streamline approval for permits. There have been new calls for eligible Israelis to carry guns. That came from both the Security Cabinet and the Police Commissioner after a Palestinian terrorist gunned people down outside a Jerusalem synagogue only a few days ago. To quote the commissioner, over the years, more than once, civilians skilled in the use of licensed weapons neutralized terrorists and prevented more serious attacks when they were near the scene of an attack. Those citizens prevented harm to civilians and the security forces more than once. Close quote. What that doesn't mention is that Israel has very strict gun control laws that disarm many of its citizens. Applicants must meet minimum age requirements, have no criminal record, and provide a declaration signed by a doctor that they're physically and mentally healthy. Applicants must also explain to the licensing division why they need to carry a gun. Does justifiable need sound familiar to U.S. citizens? They also have to explain the type of gun an Israeli is permitted to carry, and that depends on the reasons given to authorities. Remember, Israel has almost universal service in the armed forces for, is it 18 to 20-year-olds?
I think so.
Will correct me.
I think so, but I'm certainly no expert on Israeli citizenship or law. Dana says, wow, a government encouraging pogo. I don't know if they're encouraging it, but they're certainly loosening the grip on it.
One thing that, Dana, that wasn't mentioned in the article, there's been an emphasis on Israeli teachers carrying because schools were frequently targeted by terrorists. Well, good start. Now continue to learn the lesson.
Right.
All Israelis are at risk. Do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Doubt.
I want to go back to our last story, our last DG. We got a couple comments I want to get to. First one here is 500 Magnum says, I busted my head completely open twice in my life from a weight bench when I was a kid. Third time I probably won't survive. Well, I certainly hope you're using a spotter now. Just kind of leaving that one out there. He says, doctors put my head back together with a staple gun. I can't begin to tell you how unpleasant that is. Our next commenter may know something about that. Going back to Dr. John, he says, agree with your assessment of bleeding after blunt trauma while on blood thinners, Dr. John. So there we go. I think that's going to do it for our defensive gun uses. We've got one more segment to come. We're going to take a break here. We're going to hear from JPFO, and then we're going to let you know what we've been doing in media and shut the show down. We'll be back with that final segment right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. jpfo.org.
Welcome back to the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. At this point, we normally go into what we've been doing in media. I'm going to start with Rob. And believe it or not, I got something I want to talk about at the end. So, Rob, what's been going on over at Slowfax, man?
We've talked around the issue of teenagers and guns. I took the time to look at it directly. I mean, each of us, I'm sure, has been asked, when do I teach my kids about firearms? The obvious answer is when that's the safest thing to do. We've handled firearms for decades, most of us, but we've lived with them for centuries, and we also make similar decisions about our children's education all the time. Now, something is new in the gun community. We have millions of new gun owners, a record influx to the gun culture, and they didn't grow up with guns. As children, they weren't brought along step at a time. So they have some catching up to do now that they want to bring their children up to speed when they have guns in their home. That article is called When and How We Should Teach Our Children About Armed Defense. That's at slowfax.wordpress.com. Kerrie Ann, talk to me about Sisters in Arms.
Oh, I'm excited. So we just did our 7th and 8th episode, actually today. So we interviewed Jim Wallace from Goal, Gun Owners Actually. He's the director of Goal. And we also did a show on Teal for 2A, and we discussed the DC project. I just did an awesome meet and greet on January 28th, and I had the Taunton Mayor, Shauna O'Connell, come. I also had the podcast crew from Goal, Garrett Holcomb and Jeff Strider. So we had a good crew, and I got 5 extra delegates, so I'm very excited, and we have a plan. So this year is going to be awesome.
All right. On my end, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring me up again. On my end, I'm going to say this week has 2 significant occurrences. First of which is it was actually 11 years and 3 days ago that I very first hit record for what would become the Polite Society podcast. This is now, and it just so happens that this week hits episode number 650. It's been a wild, amazing ride, and when we came up on 500 episodes, I made a big deal of it then, and it was bantered around, and there were rumors saying that at 500 I would shut the whole thing down. I'd call it a podcasting and broadcasting career. That didn't happen. It's not going to happen at 650 or 11 years either. I'm having too much fun with this. It has been just a wild, amazing ride. And I want to bring up the 4-shot again because, Rob, you've been with me for the greatest majority of that. You and I go back, of the 11 years, I think you've been along for probably 10 of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And awesome. John came along shortly after that. There have been other people that have come and gone, but anybody who has ever done any work in any way with the Polite Society podcast, I want to say absolutely thank you. You've contributed so much. I could not do this show alone. It's too big, it's too complex, and I believe too important for just one person and one person only opinion. So that's kind of what I got. On my way out, I want to recognize John Richardson, who could not be here tonight. He again has been along for probably 9.5 to 10 years. Of the time I've been broadcasting. Both John and Rob have been with me a very long time. John, if you would please go catch his stuff at onlygunsandmoney.com. But there have been a lot of others, and honestly, the list is when I compiled a list when I was getting ready for 500. At that point, it was like 14 names, and after my stroke and my scrambled brain, I don't think I could recall them all off the top of my head. A few that I can are Toby and Styx. They went off and did their own podcast after they left here, and I honestly couldn't tell you if that's still going or not. But there's been a lot of people on the air and a lot of people around the show that have helped. And thank you, everybody. Thank you especially to those of you who've been, since we've gone back live on the air, have been commenting and keeping the show rolling. All the podcast listeners and anybody connected, whether you just consume the media or you help produce it, thank you. So I think that's where we're going to go ahead and set it down. I do need to remind everybody to please go check out the Facebook listeners group. If you are a member of Facebook, just search for Polite Society Podcast Listeners as a group. And we don't let just anybody in. You've got to actually be a listener to the show. There's a couple questions you got to answer. But there's a lot of the people that do listen to the show that are in there. You can get a lot of good stuff. As you can probably hear, my dog really wants to go outside. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut the show down. Thanks, everybody, for watching. That wraps up another episode of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. So for Amy, Dana, John, Susan, Amanda, Charlie, Robin, Kerrie Ann, and Rob.
Until next time,
stay safe, be aware.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and, the dog has been going nuts. I'm going to go ahead and shut the streams down now without much of a post-show. Thank you again, everybody. Monday night next week, we will be here. Monday night, 2 weeks from tonight, we won't. But thanks again for watching, and we'll see you